Let's bring in Hui Shan, the bank's chief China economist, joining us on set. When you see breakthroughs in high-performance chips tech in China, there's a lot of questions on how far we are, in China is in developing the next challenger to NVIDIA. I mean, is this something that you're looking at as an economist as well, or overall, how big of this whole self-reliance theme?
Yeah, I think it has two aspects. One is certainly the self-reliance, because China still imports quite a bit of semiconductors currently. So similar to food supply security, energy supply security, semiconductor supply security is certainly the direction for the government to push. And the second is from a growth point of view, whether it's a semiconductor, whether it's AI, whether it's robotics, shipbuilding, aerospace, all these high-tech areas, they have been a major driver of economic growth. So just think about China investment, right? Property investment down. What came up? Manufacturing investment. So from a growth and bigger picture point of view, that's also a very important pillar for China's growth model.
Have we seen employment also sort of flow into those new sectors? What's the employment picture looking like? And how is the shift taking place as well?
Yeah, employment data are not that great, so we can only provide some anecdotes. We know AI-related jobs from some of the hiring platforms seems to be doing well, but the broader employment picture is not so much. If you look at all the PMIs, they have the employment sub-index. If you just look at those, even when we see the PMIs are doing okay, the employment component is not. So between you have a weak domestic demand and you have innovation, that's in part reduce labor cost and reducing hiring. So the combination of both is putting pressure on employment.
There was that local media report about expanding some of the consumption sort of stimulus we've seen so far to the services sector. How beneficial do you think that's going to be in turning around consumption?
Yeah, the government has been talking about this for a while, right? You hear about elderly care, you hear about the ice and snow economy, the sports economy, travel and tourist. So why is the government so focused on services? You break down GDP, right? China still has GDP target, want to grow the economy. Exports already very strong. Investment already very big part of the economy. And then that leaves the consumption. But goods consumption, we had the cash for clunkers or the consumer goods trade-in program. So what is really left that has a big room for improvement and boost growth is services. And this is where I think the government, why the government is focusing on services. And relating to our conversation about employment, right? Services are labor intensive. So by growing services, you can also help alleviate that downward pressure on the labor market.
That's where the multiplier effect is going to come into play. So how does that then look? So it's easier for me to conceptualize a fiscal transfer to help goods purchases. Services, I have trouble with that sort of abstract. How would that work?
This is a new area for the government as well. I think they're experimenting and figuring things out, right? The past few years, we saw some local governments sending out coupons, so you go to restaurants. So that's one example. And some local governments will have some kind of a festival, music festival, or some festival that encourage people to sort of spend time and leisure, and that's another approach. And then when it gets to, say, high-end medical services and certain education areas, I think the government may be also thinking about if we remove some of the restrictions from the supply side, not from the demand side. From the supply side, if we provide higher quality services in areas previously with a lot of restrictions or oversight, could that boost services? So my sense, reading all these documents and looking at what the government's doing, they're thinking both from demand and supply, thinking multiple areas, still an experimenting process.
And they probably needed to offset what potential sort of external threats, right? I'm taking a look at the trade data from yesterday, where we did start to see exports are starting to slow down. U.S. orders basically plunging for, I think, the fifth straight month now. Is the export picture, that pillar, really going to start to really shrink now for the Chinese economy?
If anything, I think the exports have been surprising to the upside, even though yesterday's data per se was a miss, because that's the nominal amount of exports. If you look at the real terms, the number of cars and tons of steel, we only have July data. July up 10% year again, with a 30% tariff from the U.S. added this year. So the entire export picture has been pretty strong. But I do think the government is also thinking that, as strong as exports are, we also need some domestic driver of growth going forward.
One of my favorite things to do on a Sunday is look at my email, because you guys put in this 3 things on China that comes through. And I think the second item this week was the inflation print that comes out tomorrow. Yeah. And I think one of the observations you guys made was we might actually see the month-on-month PPI turn positive. Why is that significant?
If you're an investor, you watch the sequential month-on-month number very carefully, because that's leading, right? The young years take a few months for that number to materially change, because that 11 months is already baked in the data. If you look at the steel prices, coal prices, lithium prices, polysilicon prices, which goes into solar panel, the raw material prices did increase in July and August. So from that point of view, when you have upstream sectors price going up, whether on expectation or actually anti-involution related, if you already see commodity prices going up, that could translate into improving PPI sequential inflation. But for the young year numbers that pop up on your screen, that's going to take a while to get back to the positive territory.
So we are starting to see anti-evolution in some ways making its way, right? Are we seeing it beyond just capacity cuts?
Those sectors,
yeah.
We're seeing a mixed picture. We're seeing for the food delivery, the companies, they're communicating that the worst may be behind us. So that's part of anti-involution. We are seeing for the solar panel industry, our industry association is coordinating something. So we're seeing a mixed picture of certain actions. Chemicals industry, there's document coming out of the government. So this is still a very much wait and see for investors to figure out the magnitude of action and impact of such action.
Speaking of a document coming out, a document that has come out is this report out of you guys. The latest on internationalizing, that's another long word actually I struggle with, internationalizing the currency. I mean, it's a long process, right? You settle with trade, investment currency, reserve currency. Where do you think we are on that spectrum, and what's next to watch? Like, is this time different?
Yeah. You're exactly right that transitioning from one currency dominance to another takes a really long time. We mentioned in the piece that think about the Britain versus the United States, right? United States became the largest economy in 1870s, but the dollar didn't become the dominant currency until 1950s. So it does take a really long time for the currency handover. We think dollar dominance is here to stay. It's going to stay for a while. But if you look at the disconnect between China's economic share in global stage, right, around 15-20%, versus China's share in the global international finance is 2%. So there's a big disconnect, and we think there's room for that number to grow. China has been pushing for RMB internationalization for 15, 16 years now, but the progress has been very slow. Why do we write this report now? Between de-dollarization, another mouthful word.
You did very well, though.
And you mentioned gold. Look at what gold is doing, and part of that is the desire to diversify. And stablecoin, another innovation that introduces the challenges for monetary system. So all that complex make us think that this time might be different.
One thing people always talk about is in terms of the challenges is there the political will to loosen capital controls, right, when it comes to, this whole internationalization of the renminbi. And then there's a new thing, which is about stable coins. Might that be something that could disrupt the sort of kind of evolution that you're seeing?
Yeah, both are really important questions. I think the capital controls, some people would say that's a game changer. If you don't let loose the capital control, you can't really internationalize it. To some degree, that's right. But we also think that China's global share can it go from 2% to 4%? You're still climbing up on that process. So our view is that even with the capital controls currently in place, China's share in the global international finance could increase. At some point, if you want to go further higher, then perhaps the capital controls will become a problem, and China has to think about what to do with it.
And stablecoins? What impact?
Yeah, stablecoin, I think it's increasing the urgency for Chinese government to do something, right? China wants to build this ecosystem for developing countries and China to use RMB more, right? But if the dollar-denominated stablecoin is gaining market share, right now, vast majority of the stablecoins are dollar-based, right? So if that, the dollar is running ahead and allowing a lot of these developing countries to use dollar instead of RMB, that adds urgency for China to come up with alternative. We think the capital control is important for the government, so perhaps the offshore market, Hong Kong included, will benefit from China's push for RMB internationalization, because you want to keep that big onshore market intact and developing in the offshore market.
Fantastic. Yeah. Very, very well said. Hui Shan, thank you so much. Chief China economist there at Goldman Sachs. We covered everything, including, of course, this massive push to internationalize. I did it.
You did it.
Yeah, the Chinese currency. We will leave it